There is a contentious race for the Virginia governorship. Election's gonna take place this November. It's between Republican Glenn Youngkin and former Democratic Governor Terry McAuliffe, who also used to be the chair of the Democratic National Committee. Now, there was a leaked phone call between McAuliffe and his fellow Democrats, the consultants, whoever, and he was basically expressing some private concerns that he has about this race. So what he said, and I quote, "But we've got to get Democrats out to vote. We are facing a lot of headwinds from Washington, as you know." To get more specific, he then says this: "The president is unpopular today, unfortunately, here in Virginia, so we have got to plow through." Now, this is actually backed up by data, where a lot of the national polls and a lot of the state polling has shown that Biden's approval within the state of Virginia is not good overall. But even before Afghanistan, even before we did that, he is not performing well in that state. Now, this kind of applies to the broader issue because Biden has endorsed McAuliffe. He's campaigned for him. And a lot of people don't acknowledge that even though Virginia is considered a blue state, there are a lot of conservatives that live there.
Whole lot. Yeah. Historically conservative.
So we're seeing that Glenn Youngkin, the Republican candidate, he is starting to close in very much on this seat. And a lot of the national media is watching this because latest polling has shown that they're only within a 5% margin of leading in the polls. And the voter enthusiasm that they've talked about as well is significantly higher with Republicans in the state than with Democrats. So what I want to bring to you guys is, do you think that there's a chance that Youngkin would be able to take over this governorship? And what kind of information from this McAuliffe phone call do you think this adds to this whole race?
Well, I guess I don't really know. I'll put it at that. I have a friend in Virginia, and she's been pretty involved with different Republican campaigns. And so from what she's told me, she's a little bit more hesitant on it, just seeing like kind of boots on the ground. And so I think when you have a personal source being like, oh, I'm a little hesitant, it makes me naturally more hesitant. But just from a political level, I would really hope that there is a chance there, because I think people are starting to wake up. We've seen that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have had the worst approval ratings in recent history, historically low, worse than Trump. And that's really bad considering you have an entire mainstream media network across the country willing to protect these people.
Imagine if they didn't have that.
Imagine if they didn't have that. And we just saw the clip that Josh played you guys earlier, and he said, whoa, like people can't hide their shock and surprise at how bad this is across the board. Yeah. And so it doesn't matter if you're one of the people who's looking at foreign policy and looking at what's going on in Afghanistan. It doesn't matter if you're looking at foreign affairs with Boris Johnson and all of that, or even the economics or taxes. Every single issue that Biden has been on has been an absolute nightmare for their administration. So I'm hoping that those nightmares create, some shining star out in Virginia, and we see kind of a preview of the red wave I'm expecting for 2022.
Because here's the thing, even if Youngkin does not win that race, if it is close, if it is kind of within that margin where it's like, hey, he could have had a shot if more voters turned out in this specific area, that is a really strong indicator of what might be to come in 2022.
Yeah.
So what I want to ask you, Josh, is what are you kind of thinking in this kind of broader implication of what could happen in the next year with the administration? And is that going to help Republicans at all levels of government, or is it going to hurt them?
Well, that's a good question. You're talking about going into 2022?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Caleb Gina, one of our assignment editors, put a story together on this, and I think the title was something like McAuliffe, Biden stink is all over me. And that's not far. I mean, look, if you read in between the lines here, that's what you're getting. I mean, they are worried. I do not think the administration will be able to help itself. If they could help themselves, if they could kind of pull the reins back, surely they would have done it by now. The border, I'm not positive if I hear any actual liberals talking about how, the border's in good shape. you'll hear leftists talking about social justice and how it should be open anyway. But I don't hear anybody who we would have considered, we would have thought of as pretty left-wing liberals 10 years ago. I don't hear any of them saying, oh, everything's great, except members of the administration.
And saying that, too, is like the corporate left, I call it the corporate left because that's kind of the people we're talking about here, is they don't really feel any sort of connection to this issue, whereas like the right and the far left are like always have like this weird unity and anger about specific things for what like general democratic administrations do, because for the far left, the Biden administration is not going far enough in their actions. And then with conservatives, it's like, oh, they're going too far. They're doing the wrong thing. So it's kind of like this weird unity and hatred for it. And I think that's kind of important to bring up, where in 2022, those voters might not go out. Those leftist voters, they might not go out and vote because they're getting frustrated with the way the Biden administration is. But a lot of those Republicans and a lot of those moderates might be like, hey, I want to see some change. And even though every election cycle, it's almost like clockwork, where it's like the opposing party of the White House almost always takes the House. So I think that is something, that trend is definitely going to follow through with the past few months.